Hello and welcome, it's Neil Dougan here. It's module 12 today. We're looking at the philosophy of digestion. Many of you by now will have been experiencing quite profound changes within your digestive system, and earlier on, of course, you will have had the opportunity to have a look at the webinar series that Marianne Kanngeiser and myself prepared on the subject of the disturbances that you might be having within your digestive system, and particularly the colon or the large intestine. However, you will have noticed many changes in the entire digestive system. The question that follows from that, and I've been asked this question many times, is why on earth are we treating the subject of digestion so late in the program when so many people are finding that they're having these issues earlier on? Well, the reality is that we need to actually cover off all of the earlier material before we can get to the digestion and treat it properly. So actually be able to cover off the material properly in such a way that it's going to have the most meaning for you at every level of your being. So we're talking about the physical level of your being, all of the aspects of your mind, whether that be the emotions or the intellect or the practical brain, and also obviously the connection to the divine as well. So you can tell by the way that I'm just talking there that the subject of digestion is absolutely massive. It's an incredibly enormous subject, and we're just going to go into the main framework of it here now. So to begin with, we're going to look at the concept of impressions, and it's been said by many people, and I'm saying it again, that you would die if you didn't have any impressions. So there have been many experiments done with depriving people of sensory input. So these are the impressions that come via the five physical senses of the body, and there's no question that you become extremely ill if you don't actually have any input coming into the five senses. However, this is only the very beginning of the way in which we receive impressions into ourselves. Food is a very important aspect of the third dimensional or physical impressions that we're actually receiving into our body. Along with it, obviously, comes many subtle and more refined impressions that actually come with the food, and indeed when we're looking at digestion we're wanting to approach all of those levels. Another area that you might be a little bit surprised about, that you're actually bringing in impressions, but when you think about it, consider it, you'll understand where I'm coming from, would be other systems within your body. And a classic example would be your lungs. So when you're breathing in from the atmosphere, you're breathing in all manner of environment, all manner of impressions actually from the environment coming into your body. Another one which would be perhaps less easy to understand, or less obvious, should I say at least, in any case, would be the impressions that come in via sexual activity. So there's a tremendous range of impressions that are actually coming in, whether it be some sort of vicarious approach to sexual activity, whether it's just in your mind. Nonetheless, you have a tremendous number of impressions coming into your system via the sexual system within your being. Of course, things like our culture and our belief systems and our habits are very rich sources of impressions as well. And all of these things that we've been talking about before can have a connection to food as well. So in every case we're talking about a physical thing, which is the food or drink of some sort, and on top of that we've actually got all of these additional layers of the impressions as well. So one of the higher aspects of these approach that these impressions have are on the subtle energy centers. So by now you'll be familiar with us talking about, if you weren't already familiar about it, with this concept of subtle energy systems. So particularly the well-known ones are the chakra system, and the other very well-known one is the meridian system used in traditional Chinese medicine. And both of these cases, you've got a situation where impressions can be coming in to your being via the subtle energy systems. So as an example, we talk about the heart chakra, and in the case of the heart chakra, we have many impressions which are available from our environment. So this could be another person, or it could be something else within the environment. And these impressions can come in via the heart chakra. So, I'm putting my hand over where my heart chakra is at the moment, but of course the chakra system isn't located, it's not really attached to the body in any real sense of it. It's a subtle energy system. It happens to be co-located in this area, generally speaking. However, the heart chakra itself is able to go out and reach and bring in information. That's what we're really talking about here, with these impressions coming in into the heart chakra. And like all of these other things we're talking about, they're the subject of digestion, because every single one of these impressions that comes in has to be processed. And the digestion that we're talking about here is the process of processing all of these impressions as they're coming in. So let's talk about the components that make up the physical digestive system. As we're going through it, I'll talk about some of the subtle aspects of the physical digestive system as well. Clearly, digestion of food and drink and so on begins in the mouth, and well, so we think it actually begins in the mouth. Truly, the digestive process regarding to food or drink actually happens long before the food makes it into our mouths. We have the idea that we're going to have some food. We can use one or other of our senses. We can see a beautiful chocolate cake in a counter in the shop, and already our digestive system is kicking in and beginning to digest that chocolate cake long before you've got it in your mouth, or even before you've paid for it. Your body is beginning to digest it. So the sense of smell will trigger all kinds of things. We talk about our mouth filling up with digestive juices, related, or watering they call it, don't they? So our mouth waters when we see something that we particularly like to eat, and these are all examples of, even before the food reaches your mouth, the digestive process is already beginning. All of the ideas that are associated with that kind of food are being digested at the same time. So we'll go back to our lovely cake sitting in the glass counter at the shop, and we're looking at it and we're thinking, oh crikey, I shouldn't really be eating that. Perhaps I don't believe in eating eggs, and the cake's got eggs in it, or I shouldn't be having that much sugar, or whatever the concerns that you might have about it. You're beginning to digest all of those ideas as well. So that digestion process around even the concept, the idea of that food, is beginning at that point as well. So here we are, we're in the mouth and we're beginning to chew it up. At this point we have many processes going on. So there are many digestive juices actually excreted directly into the mouth, and it's beginning to break down the food. And indeed, one of the miracles, and something that people are often surprised when I talk about, is that by the time the food actually makes it down to the stomach, many of the complex carbohydrates, so we're talking about starchy components of the food, are already digested. They've already turned into sugar. So all of the complex carbohydrates, not all of it, but some of it, will have already been digested into sugars by the time it reaches the stomach, a surprisingly high proportion in fact. Very critically, in the mouth we have many detectors. So the mouth is full of sensory organisms on all kinds of levels, and we're talking really about chemical sensory organs within the mouth at this time, rather than taste and smell. So I know that this is a bit confusing the way I'm talking about it, but anyway, we have ways of perceiving and analysing what's actually in our mouth. That information is going into the greater being, and all kinds of responses are occurring around the body. Now, if you have a whole lot of belief systems coming in and interfering with what's happening at that process, do you think that that information is going to be accurately conveyed, or that it's not going to be subjected to all manner of interference? Well, no, of course not. That information has already begun to be interfered with due to all the belief systems, all of the emotions, all of your memories. All of this kind of stuff is working to unhinge the accuracy of the information that's coming out of the mouth at this point. any discussion about what's happening in the mouth would be completely lost if we didn't talk about what's going on with the microbiome. Now, the next module is going into greater depth about the microbiome, but we have a very, very rich range of bacteria, fungus, viruses, and parasites even in our mouth, in the area of the mouth. And the interaction that's going on between these hosted microorganisms, or the microbiome that's existing there within the mouth, and the food begins in earnest. So even when we're out looking at the cake in the shop, the microbiome is beginning to adjust and take steps itself to manage what's coming. But when the food gets into the mouth, things really begin to happen in terms of this interaction between the microflora and our system. The microflora, of course, are in complete communication with the rest of the body. So even in the mouth, we're talking about what's happening in the mouth. We've got all kinds of changes happening with the microflora within your system based on this information that's coming in. Once again, I hope I'm not over-labouring this point, but do you think that this opportunity for communication within all these aspects of what's going on here, the microbiome, all the bacteria, fungus, parasites, viruses, and all of the other cells that make up your body, do you think that could be interfered with? Absolutely. There's no question that all of these mind level things can come in there and completely interfere and change the opportunity for it to actually be accurately acted upon. So the food reaches the stomach, and it's a very, very harsh environment. So there's a lot of active microbial activity going on in the stomach, but the real beginnings of the digestion is setting in earnest at this point by the time it gets into the stomach. The stomach serves to mix and bring in a lot of digestive juices, come into the stomach at that point to break down various components of it. I'm not going to go into the specific scientific stuff that is going on in there, but there's a lot happening in the stomach in terms of inputs going in, breaking down of material, and of course there is quite significant microbial activity, even though that conditions inside that stomach are dreadful. Well, they're perfect, of course, but they're very, very harsh circumstances there, because what's going on in the stomach, it's breaking down all of these biological structures that in other ways they're set up to not be broken down in this way. So it's a very destructive process that's going on within the stomach. There are a great many diseases that occur within the stomach, and we'll talk a little bit later about the cancer of these different aspects of the digestive system, but specific to the stomach, in addition to cancers, a range of cancers that are predominant within the stomach, we have things like ulcers. So an ulcer is a wonderful example of the mind level actually coming in and so distressing what's going on with the tissues of the stomach that the end result of it is the stomach ulcer forming. So the food moves on from the stomach into the very early part of the small intestine. It's an area called the duodenum. You may have heard of that term. And the duodenum begins in the duodenum, or in the beginning of the small intestine, begins the absorption of the further digestion and absorption of nutrients into the body. I didn't mention earlier, I failed in doing this, but much of the water that you're taking in with your food or drinking actually gets absorbed off into the bloodstream in the stomach, and then in the small intestine a lot of this water gets re-injected back in. It comes in a variety of forms. It also comes into the stomach, so the stomach, there's a lot of extra fluid added in there, but it's this very corrosive type of fluid that's added into the stomach as well. But there's what I'm really trying to point out here is that there's a real flooding in and out of our body of water in this early stage of the digestion. So in the small intestine it's very liquid, and there's a lot of opportunity for the nutrients to be moving across through all the plaque made up of this microbiome into our bodies. Common ailment of the small intestine are ulcers again, and in fact ulceration can occur all the way through the digestive system, and in every case that there's a mind level engagement in that formation of these structures completely. So we're going through this process in the small intestine of the absorption of nutrients, and particularly the water-based nutrients are being absorbed into our bloodstream at this, through this part of the body. And we reach the place where the appendix is. So this is the join between the small intestine and the colon or large intestine, and the appendix is an interesting structure which appears to be, from some perspectives, an obsolete structure, relating to a time when we were far more vegetarian. So, when we were having a diet that was far more like a chimpanzee, for example, and the appendix is quite a different structure in other mammals compared to what it is in humans, and in many ways it appears as though it has little or no function. However, from a consciousness perspective, this is hardly the case. And of course, appendicitis is a very common disorder. It can happen to people in any stage of their life, but children tend to pick this up. And when we're doing the treatment work and we're dealing with digestive issues, then we're looking at what is the consciousness going on here with the appendix actually becoming inflamed and really misbehaving as it does, and can create tremendous distress in people. And as I say, a surgical procedure is nearly always called for at that point. However, when we think about the appendix, we can get a bit of a handle on the consciousness issues that are going on there and what might be actually occurring. And of course, it's a blind alley, and there are many. It's a reservoir for an incredible range of bacteria, and indeed, when the body goes through a sort of purging process, and many of the bacteria die off, huge populations of the bacteria die off. Well, the appendix fulfills this role of reseeding many of these bacteria back into the small intestine in particular. So moving on further into the colon, and the colon is the place where the dewatering really starts in earnest. So in the small intestine, the material that's in there is extremely liquid, so it's an absolutely liquid material. Once it goes into the colon, there's this process of dewatering where a lot of the water is taken out. There are actually, in our modern understanding of what's happening in the digestive system, many more digestive processes going on in the colon than just dewatering. So we used to really think of it as just being a place where dewatering was occurring. However, we know that there are many digestive processes going on here as well. One of the very important ones, and one that I find very commonly coming up in the clinic, is the business of being able to actually uptake fat-soluble nutrients. So these are particularly vitamins, but other nutrients as well. And the fat, all of this fat is actually absorbed, well, the majority of this fat is absorbed across into the lymphatic system, in fact, but it ends up in the blood eventually. So it's absorbed into the body inside the colon. So when we have the very common disorders of the colon, one of the things that we know is that there's a very high likelihood that there will be insufficient of these fats actually being absorbed across the colon boundary and taking with them all of these nutrients. So I said it in an earlier video, I think one of the videos right near the end, the very beginning of the series, that I've not met a person who was obese who wasn't suffering from some form of malabsorption or malnutrition. So it's not that they're not eating enough food. Generally speaking, they are eating enough food and eating enough of these specific nutrients. But what is actually happening is that they're not absorbing anything like enough of these nutrients across the boundary of the colon wall. So keeping your colon healthy, in fact the whole of your digestive system healthy, is a primary concern for us with this work that we're doing with Intrim. And very, very important that we're actually focusing on making sure that we can bring all of these nutrients across the boundary into the body. So the very common diseases of the colon are diverticulitis, where pouches are formed, and we've talked a little bit about this already, this idea of the bacteria needing to hide, and so they're actually hiding in these diverticulum. But another very common disease of the colon is irritable bowel syndrome. So this is very, very common. This is a condition of advanced inflammation, and ulceration often follows on from it, but a very inflamed state of the colon. And when the colon's in this advanced state of inflammation, then the chances of you being able to actually absorb these nutrients into your system are very, very remote indeed. And further to that, the opportunities of proper dewatering occurring are almost non-existent as well. So, a little bit further on in the digestive process, people end up with Crohn's disease often, and this is a very, very severe condition when it occurs. And once again, it's typified by tremendous pain and suffering that people have with Crohn's disease, and it does impact on the functioning of the bowel to a certain extent. And for many people, a surgical procedure is one of the few things that actually can be contemplated to try and manage it, and this goes for diverticulitis as well, unless they begin to do this kind of work that we're talking about. So if you catch it early enough and you're able to work with a client with any of these disorders of the bowel, then tremendous results are possible. So in all of that conversation, we've gone past the role of the liver and the pancreas and the gallbladder in the digestion, but they very, very importantly are producing digestive juices, particular digestive juices, which are involved predominantly in digesting proteins, but also other factors that are coming into the body. And they are producing this liquid material which goes into the duodenum as well. And there are very specific diseases that occur within the liver relating to the digestion. So the liver has a whole range of diseases that occur, but some of those diseases relate to the tissue that's involved in producing these digestive juices as well. Pancreas, the same thing. So the pancreas does all kinds of other things in the body, not the least of which is managing sugar, but it's also producing these digestive juices. And the gallbladder acts as a bit of a storage facility, and it has its entire own consciousness, and very, very important as well. Okay, well, look, I'm aware that this has become a very long video, and so I'd like to wrap it up at this point. I hope you found it useful and interesting, this alternative view of digestion that I've been proposing here. And I just want to go over it just very, very briefly again. We're talking about food and drink as being an aspect of the impressions that are coming into your body, and the concept of digestion is really looking at how we digest these impressions which are physical, the food, but also how we are digesting these impressions which are very subtle as well. So, as I say, I hope you found that useful. We'll be looking next at the science of the digestive system. It'll be a shorter video than this one. However, we'll go into a little bit more detail of some of the science issues that are going on there. So thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing you on the next video.